Yeah, we're recording again. We're on to item 7 on the agenda, which is East Ayrshire Performance Summary Report, and it's very helpfully it's split up into different wee sections. So we'll be careful as we're asking questions that we do it one section at a time. And the covering report, revenue council initiatives, we're going to Colin Hastings first.
Thanks, Chair. Members, this is the second East Ayrshire Performance Report of the year, and it builds on the report that was presented to you in September. In that earlier report, we highlighted the actual overspend as at the end of July and provided information on the projected end-of-year overspend across the council should no action be taken to reduce the spend and align service provision to the available financial resource. The report that I present today highlights an improving financial position, albeit there continues to be significant pressure on service budgets across the council. It is evident that the expenditure control measures approved in September are having the effect of reducing expenditure, although more work is needed to bring service budgets back into line. To continue to progress this, the Chief Executive and the Chief Financial Officer have met with relevant Chief Officers to go through a line-by-line review of service budgets to ensure that all possible intervention actions that are available are taken to gain assurance that budgets will, wherever possible, be brought back into line. At paragraph 9, page 144, we note that the total projected overspend for the Council is just over £14 million, and colleagues are compiling a range of recovery plans to address highlighted overspends. Members, you may recall following the previous East Ayrshire Performance Report, a recommendation was made seeking that a council-wide recovery plan be compiled and brought forward for consideration by Cabinet. I'm pleased to report that work on service plans is progressing and that it is anticipated that a council recovery plan will be brought forward in early January for consideration and approval. Members, between now and then, further significant work will continue to support colleagues to further review spend and spending priorities and to ultimately aim to bring their budgets back into balance. This is especially important given the work that has now progressed in developing the 25-26 budget strategy, which reported to Cabinet members yesterday. And following the budget announcement by the Finance Minister yesterday afternoon, the work will continue at pace once the detailed information behind the announcement is made available to councils next week. Paragraph 12 on page 144 notes the projected outturn position for the Education Service and notes that the overspend has reduced since the last report, which is now anticipated to be around £7.5 million. Members, you're aware that this is a budget that has experienced pressures for some time, particularly in relation to early learning and childcare service and the additional support for learning function, where we have continued to see significant overspends. However, the recent approval of the Early Learning and Childcare BVSR by Cabinet will go some way to resolving the financial pressures within that budget. Moreover, colleagues in education are working to develop options around additional support for learning transport, with these being brought before Cabinet early in the new year. It's important to note the comments made at paragraph 14, which showed the early potential options across the education service being investigated and progress totalled £2.3 million. Discussions continue with education colleagues regarding the timescale for achieving these, and final assessment will be included as part of the Chief Education Officer's recovery plan. Paragraph 15 notes the significant progress made by colleagues within communities and economy services, which are collectively anticipated to end the year in a broadly balanced budget position. However, it is important to note the pressures that continue to exist within these services and the impact that some of the earlier options that were approved to balance the budget this year. Given the importance of these budgets, together with the substantial work that service colleagues have undertaken to bring the budget back into balance, it's essential that continued support is provided to management to help progress their work. Paragraph 18 of the report sought Cabinet approval for the extended move from HVO fuel to diesel for the council fleet, with earlier approval having already been given for such a move in respect to our waste collection service as part of the waste review in August. Within health and social care, paragraph 19 notes that the service is projected to end the year around £7 million overspent, with pressures predominantly relating to community care as the service continues to experience legacy issues from the pandemic. This Q2 financial position is based on the recovery plan that was presented to the Integration Joint Board in August being fully achieved. The Chief Officer of the Integration Joint Board, supported by his management team, are progressing a further iteration of the recovery plan to include a range of options to bring the budget back into balance, and information on this will be included in the Council recovery plan that will be presented to members early in the new year. Members, at paragraph 22, Cabinet gave approval for a further draw from the Council's Innovation Fund with a request of just over £11,000 by colleagues in the Ayrshire Roads Alliance to develop a digitalised works programme which aims to establish a fully digital end-to-end system to manage all aspects of the roads work programme. This digital change, which is supported by Council Digital Management Board, would result in the ability to process requests more efficiently and ultimately lead to lower costs, and approval was sought to allocate the funds from the remaining balance from the Innovation Fund, noting that the payback into the fund would take place within around 6 months. At paragraph 25, we pick up information relating to the Council's capital programme, with additional costs noted in respect of the new escape stair at the Dower House, where costs have exceeded budget by £5,000, and more importantly noting that colleagues in Facilities and Property Management sought approval to rephase the capital programme. Information provided within the table at paragraph 28 notes that in relation to the 24-25 General Services capital budget, this would be rephased from 45.4 to 41.2 million. Members, the remaining sections of the report are covered in more detail in the accompanying report, so Chair, I'm happy to stop there and take any initial questions.
Thank you, Colin. Have we any questions? We're running up page 142 to page 150. If we have any questions, please can you use the page and the paragraph so we can follow where you're going. Councillor Cogley.
Thank you. And Colin, thank you very much for that. I suppose what I'm looking for here is an assurance that as we're now approaching the next budgeting process, that we won't run into this same issue going forward, whereby I was under the impression that we'd started the financial year with agreed budgets, which would then relate to levels of staffing with service provision to accommodate those sorts of levels, and to have it then cut back so drastically so early in the financial year. I'm still kind of struggling with that and the impact that that does have on our communities. So I guess I'm looking for an assurance from you that now that we're restarting the budgeting process, those areas of overspend that we know are going to happen, that is fully taken into account so that the budget setting is realistic. Thank you.
Thanks through you, Chair. It's a fair point to obviously kind of bring to attention and the importance of ensuring that action is taken this year, to ensure that the position this year doesn't sort of carry forward into next year and the budget process. And the discussions that have been had this year and in recent weeks with heads of service, there has been a huge focus on the need for services to implement action that will essentially bring stability to what is being classed, I suppose I would class as the structural budgets that are recurring year on year, and that represents the financial envelope. There are obviously legacy issues that have perhaps come through from following the pandemic, both within health and social care and education, and there have been a number of areas that have had short-term difficulties, and those have, and the demand within those areas has been increasing throughout this year. But the discussions that have been had and will be presented in the recovery plans that will be brought forward will focus on that need, that the actions taken by services are long-term and will fit into the budget process going forward, to ensure that the financial envelope that is available to them next year and that the service that is provided to them, that is quite clear in the recovery plan, so that it doesn't impact on the budget process going forward, and that any shorter term issues or issues that require to be addressed this year, whether that be from the one-off carry forwards from last year which haven't been able to address, are obviously separated out, but the focus has been very much on the need to provide services within the continuing structural budget that is available, and that recovery plans should focus on that.
Thank you, Councillor Cogley and Colin for the answer. Councillor Richardson.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Peter. Again, it's just I seem to have fallen on for Councillor Cogley's good questions a lot today. But I was following what you said there, Colin, back to Councillor Cogley, but I'm just a wee bit, well, I'm very concerned about education because we've currently got the 7.578 million projected overspend to March 2025. That was carrying forward 3.5 million from the previous year. And then we talk about, there's been additional pressures, etc. I'm struggling to see how education in one financial year can make savings of that magnitude. And I'm just a wee bit concerned that we're now in this situation, especially with education, where every single year, unless we really look at the council's overall budget and start to allocate more money to education out of the total pot at the start of the year, I'm starting to see how education in any one financial year is going to be able to catch up. Do you understand where I'm coming from?
Yep, thanks. Through you, Chair. Yeah, absolutely. Again, a significant part of that £7.5 million is a one-off carry forward, which was the overspend position from last year, which per our reserve strategy carries forwards into this year, with ultimately the expectation that the service should look to address that. Obviously, as part of the recovery plans and part of the discussions, and not to wishing to kind of preempt discussions that are ongoing, consideration will obviously be given as part of the discussions as to the reality of that one-off spend being able to be addressed by the service, and whether there is any other options or any other intervention that can be put forward to members to sort of look at that. But again, that would form part of any recovery plan discussion to be presented to members to make that decision as to whether that was the case or anything sort of round about that. With regards to the sort of remaining part, the sort of continuing recovery part, it has been noticed the largest part of that pressure in there is in relation to the additional support for learning, which has been the continuing pressure. And again, I would sort of reiterate that our best value review is being brought forward to address the fact that on a continuing basis, that sort of notion of that you're sort of kind of raising there of how does the service address it if it's going to continue, and that is going to involve the service having to review quite detailed criteria and options that are available to it, and the reality of the financial resource that they have there, and they'll have to make recommendations about changes in relation to that going forward. Separate to that, there are things that the service will look at as part of the recovery plan of perhaps short-term measures that can implement or provide additional short-term financial resources, and that may be reviewing some of their balances or looking at alternative funding that can sort of bridge that gap while they obviously take time to implement those options. So that forms part of the recovery plan as well. So there's a couple of stage processes in there, but it does recognise the point that obviously the notion of that amount as a one-off hit is quite a difficult option for the service to deal with. So there's a sort of number of sort of tranches of options being looked at, and that will form part of the recovery plan being brought forward.
Thanks for your answer, Colin.
Thank you, Colin, for that answer, and Councillor Richardson for the question. Can I ask paragraph 29, we're looking at absence management. It's obviously a cost to the council, and we now have a new team that are working hard to bring absence management down. Do you want in on that? Thank you, Amanda.
Thanks, Chair. So, yep, as you mentioned, we have brought a new team in. So, just as a quick high-level overview, I know there's going to be a scheduled deep dive into absence management with this committee, but to give you an update. So, as members know, we went to Cabinet in August 23 with a paper about absence management. We, at that point, agreed to introduce a temporary support and attendance officer, initially for a period of 18 months. So this post was appointed to in November 23 and has been working within facilities and property management since early in 2024, as well as carrying out other absence-related tasks that benefit for the full council. This post was focused on training the managers, looking at how the absence recorders work, reviewing the absence procedures, template letters, as well as considering how the absence reporting was working. In the period that they were in the service, and Andrew's obviously sitting here to my right, there was a decrease in the work days lost, going from an average of 2.33 to 1.42. However, that has increased again. So we identified that whilst this was a positive move, one person wasn't going to turn that ship for the full council. So from the paper that we had done that went to CMT this year, we then went and there was an ask of Cabinet on the 4th of September with an East Ayrshire Performance Quarter 1 paper and £0.608 million from the General Fund uncommitted balances was put aside to introduce a temporary support and attendance and wellbeing team, which will assist services in the attendance management and the wellbeing supports and a targeted digital post to take this forward. So we have now recruited to all those posts. The posts sit within health and safety, which sits within the wider people and culture. Jane McKee, who already had a lead for the Council on Wellbeing for Employees, will manage that team. She's supported by a senior support and attendance and wellbeing officer who was one of my HR business partners, so is experienced in the council's policies, procedures and absence management process. And they're also supported by 2 support and attendance officers, one being Lorna Smith, who was the individual that we appointed in the first instance, and the second being Frank Johnson. So the team will work between themselves, but trying to take that balance of supporting the wellbeing to keep folk at work, get the proactive stuff done, but also getting folk back to their work or moved on if that's the right process for them. The further post that we've put in there, and they just started on Monday, is a digital assistant post, and that's to be update all the absence processes to make it sort of one-touch digital. It's very paper cumbersome and a lot of work for managers just now to make sure that everything's progressed properly and recorded properly in case we get to the point where we do need to dismiss somebody. We need to make sure that that's really robust. But that will have an efficiency saving across the council. Because each service has got teams that do a lot of that work manually just now. So once we get that embedded, that'll support them. The team are going to, so it's a spend to save initiative we'll put in. We're confident that they will be able to, with that extra support, the responsibility still sits with managers for managing absence. The HR business partners for the wider HR team will still support managers with that, but with this additional capacity and focus, we're hoping to be able to reduce the absence, but we will formally review it after a year, but we'll be ongoing monitoring to see that we'll only just run the same team for 2 years, be assured that if it's not making the impact that we hope it will make. So initially what they're going to focus on is stress related to absence, and that's personal stress, work related stress, or personal and work related stress, and musculoskeletal. And the real reason for that is personal stress and musculoskeletal have been the top 2 reasons for absence for the last 5 years, in fact probably the last 10. And they equate to 42% of our absence across the council. So the team are going to focus on that. We're hoping with that opportunity, we're having it as well-being and support and attendance. It's that dual role about trying to support folk to stay at work, but also help them get back to work quicker, but make sure the absence management has been progressed in line with the policy. We're looking at a number of different things. The first one that we're looking at, and we're going to pilot at for January, is early intervention. We've currently got early intervention with our last occupational health provider for stress-related cases and musculoskeletal. The analysis we've done, we're not sure that it actually is making any positive impact or any great positive impact. So what we're early thinking, and the pilot we're going to run is that these cases will go in straight to the support and attendance and wellbeing case rather than the occupational health provider, so that we can go in and put the bespoke support to the individuals there and then. For musculoskeletal, they'll go straight to our physio-care provider, and they will provide an assessment and what duties the individual can and cannot do. But as I say, we're going to run it as a pilot to make sure whether it works or not in the first instance. And then if it does work, we're looking at the policy next year, so we would incorporate it within that. We introduced for the Cabinet paper the independent review panel, which was established, and it's chaired by myself. It's also attended by the Chief Executive and other senior officers from legal services and from my own service of people culture. The review of that is to review the management of complex absence cases, ensure that they are complying with the support and attendance and wellbeing support and attendance at work policy. That started in April, and it's been a bit of a slow burner, I have to say. We've scheduled for every 6 weeks 3 cases. We've been getting an average of 1. However, in the last couple of weeks, we have had 1 yesterday with 1 case, and we've had to set up another panel in a fortnight's time because we've got 3 cases coming forward. So I think managers are starting to see the word's starting to get out there of the benefit of that. So hopefully that will increase. And that's obviously to give members assurance as well that we are taking a deep dive to make sure the cases have been managed properly in case the individual ends up being dismissed and then could end up in an appeals panel in front of members. We've extended the remit of that panel, and Andrew kindly has agreed to go first at the start of next year, whereby we'll take a section of that meeting and we'll bring in the head of service and their senior managers. There's templates to be filled in, and we'll look at the full compliance of the absence management policy. Where are they complying, where are they not? Take areas of best practice and share them across the council, and then from the support and attendance and wellbeing team, work out what's the right support for that service, because it won't be the same for everybody. So that'll be a bit bespoke. We are working on a communication strategy, and that's about raising awareness. It's about reminding managers of their responsibility, but it's also reminding employees of their responsibilities as well. And we've already identified, so the policy, we've already identified a number of things that's due for review next March. So we've started the benchmarking, we're setting up the working group. We're reviewing the short-term persistent absence where there's emerging patterns coming. We are considering, should they be disciplined if it's consistent, short-term persistent absence. We're reviewing the occupational health referrals, when they're made and what they're made for, going back to the early interventions as well. Our current policy is if you're off for 4 weeks, everybody goes, but is that really the right time for folk to go or not? So we're reviewing that. We're looking at, we've got a number of employees in the council who've got 2 posts, maybe in Andrew's service and then maybe in Eric Sutherland's service. So how do we manage that better? Looking at mitigation, we're looking at every area in the policy. One of the other areas that we've identified early that we're looking to probably introduce is that we are getting numbers that's increasing of employees who are not attending occupational health appointments, so that they will be charged if there is no good reason why they didn't. Now, if they've been taken to hospital, something's happened, that's understandable, but if it's just that they're thinking they can push it down the line, then we'll look at it for that point. So early stages, but a lot of work going on, and hopefully gives members a bit of confidence that we've got the bit between our teeth. We will do the supportive bit about trying to keep folk at work, which is the thing bit, but we'll also do the baton down the doors to move things on as well. Thanks, Chair. Happy to get.
Thank you, Amanda, for a very detailed answer on how we're dealing with absence management, and the best of luck to your team, your new team, as they try and bring absence levels down. Any other questions? Councillor Richardson.
Just a question there for Amanda. I think it's great what we're trying to do. I mean, we're trying to help people back into their position with the council. Obviously, dismissal would be the very last resort, but just something you said right at the end there, Amanda. See, where we're providing all that support and we're setting up occupational health appointments for the member of staff who's off their work. If that member of staff misses those appointments, and when the council contact them, when HR contact them, they don't really have a decent excuse for missing the appointment. They've just not been bothered to go. Would that then be in a position where that's a disciplinary? Because to my mind, it should be, because we're trying to help the person back into work and they're not really accepting the help. But I just wondered what the position would be.
Yep, so it could well end up down being a disciplinary route. If it was a one-off thing, that's the bit where we're looking at first. And then obviously attaching that cost, it costs us £40 for every appointment. we're still having to pay whether an employee turns up or no. So by putting that charge on, hopefully that will encourage them. But then normally first there would be a discussion about their roles and responsibility. And again, that would come into the communication strategy. So you do hear in many places that everybody in the council is entitled to 6 months full pay, 6 months half and 12 months unpaid. No, it's not automatic that you're yes, that's your terms and conditions, that's your sickness entitlement, and that's nationally set, that's not set by us. But it doesn't automatically mean you can just be off as often as you like and exhaust those sick pay avenues. You do have to comply with the policies of the council.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Councillor Richardson, for the question. David, did you want in on this?
I was just to supplement and support what Amanda said, and just a little nuance, because as an employer, as you've heard, we are absolutely doing everything we can. And I think it's generally accepted that taking the approach of supporting attendance rather than the negative perception of managing absence is the right way to go. And the vast majority of those that are off are in situations where they will benefit from that support. In terms of employment law, the word reasonable underpins everything. And if as an employer you act reasonably, the chances are you'll survive any claim. On your specific point about if somebody doesn't turn up at one OC health appointment, then as Amanda's rightly said, in theory and in practice, it may well be that could be dealt with as a standalone disciplinary matter. However, I think it's probably more likely that if you're in an overall arrangement or approach whereby you're trying to support somebody back and they are not making progress and they are not availing themselves of the measures that are made available, I don't know that you would necessarily go and immediately start a disciplinary action for one missed OC health appointment. I think it's probably more likely it would be swept up in the overall likely outcome, which would be dismissal through overall capability, and the fact that a colleague wasn't attending and taking advantage of all supports and not making progress while not doing so would all feed into that final determination of are they likely to recover and is it reasonable to wait any longer or do you terminate their employment now in grounds of capability. And somebody who wasn't availing themselves of all the supports we're offering is probably going to find themselves there quicker than somebody who was.
Thank you, David. Councillor Cogley.
Yep, thank you very much. And Amanda, thank you very much for that very full and detailed response. And now this time it's me following David on a questioning line. As far as the occupational health and the physio is concerned, I would like to see physio being automatically included when we see this huge number of people with absence for musculoskeletal issues. Then I would have thought if we're providing a physio service, people should be obliged to take that up unless they have their own private arrangements. That's just one point I was making. And then two other things I wanted to raise. I get concerned about the number of automatic sign-offs by GPs. And I know that's not something we can address or resolve in this room, but I think it's something that I would like to flag because I think GPs too easily will provide a sick note because they've think it's their role to do so, and it's not necessarily. I think if somebody is suffering from stress or a well-being type issue, I think very often they're actually better in the workplace where you are surrounded by people who can give you a bit of companionship rather than dwelling on it at home. So that's one point I wanted to raise there. And just one other thing, Amanda, which I know you and I have touched on, and this is the category of absence which is called special leave. And of course, that's not included in the absence figures that we've got here. So people who are taking time off because of a bereavement or another sort of domestic type thing, those figures aren't included. And I think we've had a conversation about that. You might want to just inform the group. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cogley. Amanda.
Yeah, through you, Chair. So take them in turn. With regards to the physio, up to date, that has not been an automatic. That's been whether it can be seen as a support, but the early intervention, as I had mentioned, was through occupational health, and then they would assess whether or not to defer them. The suggestion that I'm saying is from January as a pilot, we are going to make that early intervention as it will be the physio-care that will decide whether they need a course of physiotherapy or what can they do. It might be adjusted for 4 weeks. You need to adjust what you're doing, that sort of side of stuff. So that's what we're bringing in for January. With regards to GP sign off. Yes, it's a bugbear of us all. Unfortunately, we can't control what they do or don't put in the note. However, that's where occupational health comes in and our new provider in early stages, but all is noting positive and much more proactive than our previous provider. They are experts in whether and about employees being able to come to work and what they can and cannot do, rather than being a general practitioner. So we are anticipating and hopeful that in going forward we will be getting cases where our occupational health will be saying the individual is fit to come to work in some shape or form. Those are the ones that, as David mentioned earlier, they might be the ones that come forward as a dismissal earlier than others if they're still refusing to come to work. With regards to 3, yes, special leave, there is a number of categories of special leave, one being bereavement, noting that bereavement, obviously, some individuals go off sick as well as bereavement. So I have had a look, and I will include special leave categories in East Ayrshire Performs going forward. But just for members' interest, in this quarter that's reported, there was 240 days, which is 0.002% absence with thing. So the difference, just for everybody, is the special leave is whereby a close family member or someone, it's either the time off for the funeral or up to 5 days is allowed in special leave, whereby you are making arrangements for the funeral, you're dealing with the business, whether that's with a solicitor, with the will, etc. So you're allowed up to 5 days for that. If individuals then do not feel able to return to work, some individuals would go off sick. In most cases, you would expect folk back after the 5, but as you know, we do sometimes have pretty tragic circumstances in folks' families and that, and then they're not able to come back. It doesn't always come through a fit note for the GP as bereavement. Sometimes it will come through as personal stress. So we just have to navigate our way through that. But we'll include it going forward.
Thank you, Amanda. I'll take one more before we move on a wee bit. Councillor Hogg online.
Thanks, Chair. Just to address a couple of things. For somebody like me that does sick notes, they're not given out willy-nilly, I can assure you. The first 7 days by any employee is a self-certificate, and then after that we will assess them and see whether or not a sick note. And there's really not a sick note anymore anyway, it is a fit for work note, and at any point within that space, a person can return to work. So the notes that we have now are not saying that you cannot work for 2 weeks. We will say, on balance, we don't think within this time you might not be fit for work, but if you feel you are, you can go back. So there is that space in there. In relation to the new service or the pilot, which I can see is being beneficial, with the dismissal type of thing, where we're saying that the company coming in may have a better overview of what to do rather than the GP. Just on that, if we do dismiss someone and they take it to a tribunal, my worry would be that we may be left wanting if the GP had said that they were not fit for work, but we're saying they are. It would come down to who they're going to give the biggest weight to. Now, would that be the GP or would that be the business, the private business that are being brought in to assess? And I fear that it may weight the GP and we might leave ourselves open. So that's just my concern on that one. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hogg. Amanda?
Thanks, Councillor Hogg. Yeah, in relation to the second part of that, your question, rather than the bit about the fit note, we'll not rehearse that again. It wouldn't be standalone, just the GP versus the occupational health. If I wasn't clear, apologies. What I was meaning was it would be one of the cases that would probably end up in dismissal a bit quicker than some of the others, but all component parts would be taken in. So it's about, for us, it's about sustaining support, attendance at work. And if an individual can't fulfil their contract because they can't attend work, then we have to look at everything around. And to be we're not glib about that. It's not something that we jump into. In some cases, we do let drift, and that's where we need to address it. So we need to make sure, and one of the things that I didn't say is everybody that's been off for more than 6 months will have a personal action plan wrapped round about that. That'll not be the same for any 2 individuals, because it will depend on what the condition is. It will depend on how they're engaging with the the supports that we've got in place. So there's many component parts, and that's another role for the IRP, where David's colleagues sit alongside us in people and culture, that each case before they would move to any dismissal would be reviewed in the fullness. And then we might have to go back to stage 2, stage 3, and review things to make sure that we wouldn't be jumping in. We're not known for jumping in and ending up in employment tribunals, and can reassure you that's not the case. We would make sure we do need to more robustly manage the absence, but we will still make sure that we cover all the points.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you,
Sorry.
Councillor Hogg, for the question. Did you want back in? Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. It's I'm puppy sitting, as you can understand, so I'll let that one go. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hogg and Amanda, for the reply. We'll move on a bit. The next chunk is in the same report as revenue, page 153 to 157. Colin.
Thanks, Chair. The revenue section begins on page 152. The tables have been changed slightly to take account of the work that is taking place in respect of the forthcoming recovery plans within relevant services. Within education, you can see continued pressures around both additional support for learning teaching costs, as well as the significant pressure in relation to additional support for learning transport. Moreover, the service highlights that the central budget held in respect of secondary and primary school absence cover will end the year significantly overspent, as the Chief Education Officer provides additional support to head teachers with temporary supply teachers to cover within schools. Within finance and ICT, governance and people and culture, we see underspends, which will be used at the year end to support the council-wide position and end the individual service overspend positions. Members, you will recall that previous East Ayrshire Performs report contained the recovery plan for communities and economy, and again it is important to recognise the work that colleagues in these services have undertaken in recent months to bring the projected overspend back into balance. We see from today's report that communities and economy is anticipated to end the year in a break-even position should plans progress, but we must also recognise the pressures and challenges that remain within these services and the support that will be needed to provide sustained financial stability going forward. This is noted particularly within the Ayrshire Roads Alliance and housing and communities, both of which are anticipated to overspend at the year end as a result of ongoing pressures. Within wellbeing, the report highlights an overspend of just under £7 million projected at this point in time. It notes that this is after the application of £1.6 million cost reductions based within the initial recovery plan that was produced some months ago. However, as noted earlier, the Chief Officer of the Integration Joint Board is progressing a further iteration of that recovery plan in order to reduce the overspend further. Pressures in supporting older services, providing self-directed support packages across services, and the cost of out-with placement support are the main areas of pressure. On page 157, information in relation to the housing revenue account is shown. It shows that the HRA is anticipated to end the year around £400,000 underspent, with additional costs being offset by lower than anticipated debt charges and staff cost savings. Page 159 gives further detail and narrative around the initiatives that were approved by Council in February 2024 as part of the budget. They show the allocation provided and the spend that is being incurred in the delivery of the initiatives, with information around half-price school meals, clothing grants to 3 and 4-year-olds, and additional works carried out to roads and pavements. Pupil Equity Fund information begins on page 161 and shows the allocation across our schools, with the planned spend against the £4 million Pupil Equity Fund that was allocated by Scottish Government. We note that expenditure of around £1.8 million has already been incurred, with £2 million of planned spend anticipated to take place between now and the financial year end. The analysis also shows that some schools plan to carry forward £175,000 of pupil equity funding between April and the end of the academic year in June next year at this time. The alternative delivery model section contains financial analysis of the Ayrshire Roads Alliance and East Ayrshire Leisure Trust. It notes that the ARA is anticipated to end the year overspent by around 1.3 million. The majority of this relates to spend within the local delivery element of South Ayrshire Council due to higher costs in respect of street lighting, electricity, subcontractors and new IT systems. Within the strategic delivery element of the Alliance, we see an underspend of around 260,000, predominantly due to savings in staff costs. Within the local delivery element of East Ayrshire, we see an overspend of around 450,000 due to shortfalls in roads maintenance income, shortfalls in parking income, along with higher costs for street lighting, electricity, winter maintenance and consultancy costs. Page 165 and 166 contain details of the Ayrshire Roads Alliance capital section and include a range of information around road maintenance and road slips, bridges works on the A71, A735, alongside information on the new Cumnock flood scheme. In respect of the East Ayrshire Leisure Trust, we note a planned underspend of around £10,000 at the year end, similar to the position at Q1. Information in respect of the Council's treasury management arrangements are contained on page 169. They show the maturity profile of loan debt and information on our investments. At the time of the report, the Council had outstanding debt of 461 million and notes that new borrowing of 55 million has been taken since the start of the financial year. It also notes that the Council had around £67 million worth of funds invested, with the majority of this placed within the Debt Management Office within HM Treasury. If I move ahead a few sections to business briefings, members' business briefings begin on page 187 and contain a number of performance indicators that services wish to draw your attention to. Within Chief Executives, information relating to benefits processing, planning applications and building warrants, and noted within Communities Economy information relating to tenancy sustainability, void rent loss, housing rent arrears and bridge inspections. Complaints begins on page 195. We note 37 complaints were received within the period and 9 were carried forward from Q1. The improvement actions are as noted at the foot of page 195 and the time taken to respond to complaints is contained in the graph on page 196. Members, the Corporate Risk Register begins on page 198. No new risks have been added to the register, nor have any risks changed their status at this time, and the Risk Register was considered and reviewed by CMT on the 24th of October. Chair, I'm happy to end there and take any questions before passing across to colleagues for Capital, People and Health and Safety sections.
Thank you very much, Colin. If we can break it down, any questions on revenue, page 152 to 157? Nothing online? No questions. Okay, council initiatives, page 158, 159. Any questions on council initiatives? No? You're getting off light, Colin. Pupil Equity Fund, page 160, 161, 162. All right, we'll have two. Councillor Watts first online and then Councillor Richardson. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Right, we all understand that pupil equity funding is to help reduce the impact of poverty on our children's learning and to also help close the poverty-related gaps, attainment gaps. Now, the money, as we know, is ring-fenced and comes directly from Scottish Government as such to schools. And I note that obviously we have an overspend position. But I think something that I've picked up from the report in front of us, Colin, is that when we look at the PEF spending across our estate, primary schools seem to basically spend their allocation of PEF funding. However, when you look at sort of Loudon, Kilmarnock Academy, Grange Academy, Doon Academy and the Robert Burns Academy, all of the actual secondary establishments are looking to carry money over into the next year. So Why are we doing that? Why are we, when that money in theoretical terms to me is there to reduce the impact of poverty on our children that we have in our schools at the moment? Why within our secondary schools are we not actually spending PEF funding, and we're almost carrying it forward consistently almost into the next year? Thank you.
Through you, Chair. Well, obviously the plans in relation to each of the individual schools is with the head teacher and forms part of the school improvement plans that they take forward. I suppose to highlight while there are underspends that carry forward, I would note probably a couple of things that by nature of the size of the secondary schools, there tend to be larger allocations that are placed in there, which obviously allowed for a sort of wider sense of how the school can sort of enact that within their school improvement plans. But also schools do currently within the sort of kind of guidelines have the option to whether to manage their funding to a financial year or whether they choose to manage that through to the academic year. So although on paper for the purposes here there is a financial underspend at the end of the 31st of March, and that's what we are showing here, it may very well be, and it would be the intention that the school would be using that fund to allow them to carry their activity forward through to the end of the academic year at June. So it may be that if they've put resources towards the support of a teaching post or something like that, it's on the basis that their plans carry forward academic year, and we would anticipate that by the end of June that funding would be utilised. Although funding was allocated by the Scottish Government on a multi-year basis a number of years ago to enable schools to sort of have a bit of more planning longer term on that rather than have to spend it on individual years. But certainly indications are that the schools would plan on, if not on a financial year basis, on an academic year basis. But that may very well be down to how the schools are choosing to plan to spend that money.
Thank you, Colin. I think there is a flip side to that then on what you were saying, that if we're looking at the financial year, which obviously ends at the end of March, the flip side to that would be that the secondary schools have got funding then available to the end of the academic year, which is obviously the end of June, but therefore all the primary schools have got nothing left to spend from March to June.
Well, obviously, in terms of it, the allocations come from the Scottish Government on an annual basis, so there is a fresh allocation of PEF that will come in from the 1st of April. So what essentially is happening is the primary schools would immediately go into accessing that new funding for that term for the new financial year, and that would carry forward from then. So again, that's something that they have to manage as part of their school improvement plans as to how they choose to do that, and that's obviously down for discussions between the schools, the head teachers, the school boards, and through to the senior management in education and the chief education officer to sort of deal with that. But that's how it's not that the primary schools aren't left with any pupil equity funding. It's they would immediately start using their new funding for the new financial year.
Right. Okay.
Thank you, Colin, and thank you, Councillor, for the question. Councillor Richardson.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Peter. Yeah, it's just a question for Colin. A couple of questions, actually. I love the idea of PEF. I think giving the head teachers and management teams within schools a sum of money to use during a year is a great idea, because who knows better than the head teacher of a primary school as to what that school needs and what their pupils need. So I love this idea. But my couple of questions are, see how you were saying, Colin, that the money is allocated by the Scottish Government every year? I noticed when you were saying that, I expected to look at the amount of money being allocated and for it to be, certain types of school by size probably would get a fixed sum of money. But it seems to me that each individual primary school, I can't see two amounts the same. See in the second column, 2024-2025 PEF allocation, every single school to me seems to get its own individual amount of money. Now that is if that can be done accurately, that's some system. And I'm all for individual schools getting the sum of money that they're entitled to, but I half expected it to be, in categories. So it was just a wee question around that. How do the Scottish Government work out what each individual primary school actually needs with regards to PEF allocation? And my
Thank you,
last question was, see if a school is in the lucky situation where they're actually carrying forward money, we don't ever say to them, you've built up too much of a carry forward. Can we claw some of that money back? I would hope the answer to that would be that if a school was building up a sum of money that they were carrying forward, that we would allow them to carry forward that until there was something came up that they wanted to spend it on. I hope there's never any question about clawback, is there? If they're carrying forward, what we would then, somebody somewhere would start to say that's too much to be carrying forward, we want some of that back. I hope that would be the case. So 2 questions.
Thank you, Councillor Richardson. We'll go David Mitchell and then Colin.
I think just to reassure, as Colin did, that the headlines where the PEF money is, it's allocated to the schools, it's held by the schools until it's spent by the schools, and for all the arrangements we have in place, we've never yet returned any of that money to the Scottish Government. You've answered your own question because it's ring-fenced, so there'd be never a question of the council taking it off any school that hasn't spent it and putting it into mainstream funds, because that would be against the terms of the budget settlement. There will be rules at the back end in terms of ultimately, but there's ultimately, if it's not spent, the Scottish Government might seek it return. But that's why we've put such a focus, and that's why we report it in this way, so that each head teacher knows that their ability to spend the money within the timescales is something that's kept under review through this process at both Cabinet and GNS. So they know they're being watched on the spend. They know it's theirs to spend. They know they have to spend it, and we give them the maximum period of flexibility to spend it. And my understanding is I don't think we've ever returned any funds yet, despite the concerns. Otherwise, Colin's given a very clear and detailed answer as to the actual approach and the reporting of this, because it was built into these reports because of the recognition of the importance that it be put to its intended use, and it's been given its right place and overall firmament here in East Ayrshire Performance Report. And the bottom line is that with that scrutiny and oversight, members can be assured that it does get spent, even if it's carried forward in between the financial year to the school year. It is just a matter of timing. The headline is it comes in, it sits with the schools till they spend it, and we've never returned a penny yet.
Oh, brilliant. That's what I wanted to hear.
Yep. Just to add on to kind of confirm to that is the case. It goes on to the schools. There isn't any sort of kind of clawback or anything like that, but there is monitoring by the Scottish Government to actually ensure that the spend's in line with the guidance, and that there would be no examples of any school not choosing to use that, and that would be where the Scottish Government would rightly ask questions. Would that be the case? To add on to the sort of kind of initial first question about the allocations are at an individual school basis and done by the Scottish Government. They actually get an individual list, and it is based on information on school roll numbers, and the uptake of free school meals is added in as a variation depending on, so there's a deprivation factor in there to focus on areas where schools and where poverty related attainment is more focused. So the more the school is in a more poverty related area and pupils maybe more susceptible to that, there's a higher focus and a higher allocation given to that school in order to put that, and then that's kind of carried forward. So but the information actually is allocated out on a school by school basis by the Scottish Government. The council don't play any part in that.
Again, that's a good answer, Colin. It sounds to me as if that's a way of accurately getting to an individual figure for each individual school circumstances and the background of the pupils that are attending that school. So, no, that all sounds good.
Thank you, Councillor Richardson and Colin and David for replies. We'll go to the next chunk, which was alternative delivery models, which is looking at ARA and bridges and road slippages and stuff. Page 163 to 167. Any questions? No questions online. Okay, the next chunk was our Treasury, page 168, 169. Any questions on Treasury? No, nothing. Next part was down at business briefings, page 186 to 193. Business briefings. Any questions? Not yet.
That's the David's Falls, isn't it?
And complaints, 194, 195, 196 complaints. No questions? Nothing online. And risks, the last bit column is numerous risks, page 197 to 212. 197 to 212 on risks. Any questions? Okay, thank you. That's Colin off the hook a bit. We're going back now to capital programme, which is page 170 to 174. We're going to Simon Bell.
Thanks, Chair, and good afternoon, members. Obviously conscious it's been a busy morning, so I won't go through the report in great detail, but maybe just highlight some key points for a selection of projects. Starting with completed projects, with the SHIP programme development at Kennedy Drive in Kilmarnock, the first two phases of homes have now been handed over, and the remaining two phases are due for completion by January next year. There's approximately £27 million of construction contracts currently on site, and that includes the St Sophia's Primary School Enerfit refurbishment and the Galston Library projects, both of which are progressing well and anticipated to complete in spring of next year. We also have the demolition of the multi-storey car park in Kilmarnock, where works commenced in September and are due to complete next April. Projects at a detailed design stage include the Cultural Kilmarnock project, where a favourable review of the project is now being completed by advisors engaged by the UK Government. And this review will support a project adjustment request, which has recently been submitted to the Government, seeking an extension to the current March 26 deadline. The design team and the preferred contractor have also commenced market testing. And at Stuart Academy, designs for extension and refurbishment have been revised around future growth projections and essential needs. And work's also in progress with planning development colleagues to ensure that developer contributions are maximised where possible as a means of offsetting cost pressures associated with the project. Projects at the earlier stage of development include the Ayrshire Engineering Park, an Ayrshire Manufacturing Investment Corridor at Moorfield as part of the Ayrshire Growth Deal, where an outline planning application for the master plan is being processed and design work is progressing well. We've also had positive discussions which are ongoing with Scottish Power Energy Networks regarding the necessary electrical network upgrade, and it's anticipated that phase 1 site infrastructure works could commence in spring of next year. At the Galleon Centre, work's ongoing with the key stakeholders to finalise the optimum procurement solution and scope of works for refurbishment and alteration of the facilities. And with the Doon Valley Community Campus, a range of surveys were undertaken over the summer break to inform an outline refurbishment strategy, which is currently being finalised. We're also continuing with positive discussions with the Scottish Futures Trust in relation to the previous LEAP Phase 2 funding and how the revised project may still be able to meet the funding criteria. So thanks, Chair. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I nearly called you Colin again. That was Simon. Thank you, Simon. Any questions for Simon on the capital programme, page 170 to 174? Councillor Richardson.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Chair. Simon, it's just a quick question. Right at the bottom of page 171, the three primary schools, obviously, in my own ward, Ward 2, are mentioned. Now, I know that every penny's a prisoner just now, but the council managed to find 14.75 million to be spread amongst those three schools. And obviously, we did a great job at On Thank in bringing in, better toilet facilities at the the Special Learning Centre that was urgently needed over the summer holidays. That was a real emergency, and I think the council did superbly there in upgrading those facilities. But obviously, every week or at least two in every month, there's parent council meetings which myself and my colleague, Councillor Cowan, attend at all three primaries, and the parents and the parent councils at these three primaries are really interested in what progress is being made. Now, each of the three primaries want to do different things. But for instance, let's just take Hillhead as the example here. Hillhead want to build a new school meals hall, a dining hall, assembly hall, whatever you want to call it. They want to build that in the current car park, which is in the middle of the school playing grounds. Now that new centre will join the ECC to the primary school, and the hope is that it will bring everything together so that they all feel a part of the sort of one sort of campus. It also has major implications with regards to safety, because just now parents have to drive into the middle of the playground, the middle of the campus to park, and there's all sorts of near misses, etc. happen. Whereas part of this,
I would come to a question here, Councillor Richardson.
yeah, part of the redesign of this campus is that the parking will be taken outside of the campus. So this has major safety implications. Can I ask that the local elected members, myself and Elaine Cowan, are copied into any such updates, such as when we have plans for the Hillhead redevelopment, could the local councillors be copied in those plans so that we can share these with the parent councils, because it's really important that we keep the parent councils, the parents, up to date with what's happening with this 14.75 million, because just now I think they're asking a lot of questions because nobody seems to know each of the three schools
Thank you.
where we're at with it.
Thank you, Simon. Or David, did you want?
Well, I think there's a couple of points in there just before Simon comes in, which is one, my understanding is the general approach. If there's design work's been done, whether it's a new extension or a new build particularly, but the normal approach of colleagues in facility and property management is to engage with the school communities in that. So that's one aspect, and I don't think that engagement should be properly carried out on behalf of the council through local members. However, local members should always will always have an interest and a right to be kept up to speed on what is happening in proposals that affect their ward. That would be all local members for all groups. So I think there's no harm in sharing emerging proposals with members, but I think it should be in the context of the existing arrangements by which colleagues in the service engage with the school communities around design proposals, where that is a relevant feature of the overall works proposed. So that's a yes to sharing appropriate information at the appropriate stage with local members to keep them in the loop, but making that distinction that I think it falls to officers delivering the designs to have that engagement with the school communities rather than through local members at parent council meetings. And I would just make that distinction. But over to Simon in terms of what the current approach is through you, Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, as David said, our current arrangements are to involve the relevant stakeholders, engage with the school community about these emerging designs. The reason why there's not been much sort of visibility around about the three schools in question just now is really down to where their financial phasing is in the capital programme. You know, as part of the borrowing challenges that we faced and the review of the capital programme back in May, the kind of main funding for these projects is pushed out a bit. So we're not really at that stage yet to take them forward. That said, there has started to be discussions with the relevant schools and with our education colleagues about what the scope of works might be around about a number of challenges, one of which is the increase in need for additional support needs and where that might be best addressed. And we have had dialogue specifically around about Hillhead in relation to the traffic issues and concerns that are raised, and also recently, as recently as yesterday, actually with the management team at Onthank Primary School around about some of their concerns and priorities as they see them. So as we start to kind of circle what the whole scope of the investment might look like at each of these schools, and it will have to be prioritised around about the essential needs of the building fabric and services, and obviously as much as we can invest in improving suitability of the educational facilities. When we start to surround what that looks like, that's when we engage with the school, with the parent council, with the pupils, and obviously keep local members well up to speed in terms of how that develops.
Can I go
Thank
back
you.
to Simon in that, Peter?
Yes, okay.
Yeah, Simon, I'm glad I asked the question because see, this is the first time that I'm ever finding out that the main funding for the 3 school projects here, the 14.75 million, has been pushed out. So when it says in the paper here that the works are due to commence 2025-2026, does that mean it's been pushed out further than that?
Through you, Chair. I don't have the breakdown of the actual capital programme phasing just right in front of me just now, but that's I think that's making reference to this starting the early scoping exercise 25-26. And it does actually say it, or later for the majority of projects. So it relates back to the capital programme that was approved by Cabinet in May and the funding profile that forms part of the appendix for that. And certainly I can go back to the detail of that and provide you that information with the meeting if that would be useful.
That'd be brilliant, Simon. If I could get a wee email just when, when do we expect these projects to start to come through, that'd be brilliant.
Thank you very much, Councillor Richardson and Simon, for bringing your chunk of that report. Thank you. Nothing else on capital programme. We'll move on to people, page 175 to 182.
Thanks, Chair.
Linda.
I'm only going to pull out a few highlights, and then obviously happy to answer any questions. I wasn't going to cover the absence part of it, given the discussion that we've already had. So the disciplinary activity at page 177, just as means as update. At the time of the report, there were still 3 under consideration. One's been closed off with no further action. One has been issued with a final written warning and 1 verbal warning. On page 179, members will see the breakdown of Jobs and Training Fund as at the 30th of September. Just to let you know that we've sent out a request to CMT for what the future needs would be for jobs and training should there be agreement on further funding. The £6 million of the fund has now been fully committed, and I'm pleased to say that we've exceeded our target of 200 by appointing 239 apprentices in different guises. Recruitment updates at the bottom of page 179. The leavers on page 180, you'll note that there's 47 under the other category. 40 of these are temporary employees whose contract came to an end. The payroll activities detailed on page 180 with the communications overview in 181 and 181 OD key performance areas through to 183, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Amanda. Any questions in the room on the people subject to the report 175 to page 182, but not on absence, because I think we've talked that to death earlier on. Any questions? Nothing online?
No.
Okay, we'll move on to the next part, which is health and safety. And we're at David Doran, please. It's page 183 to 185.
No, thanks, Chair, and good afternoon, members. The report in front of members covers pages 5 to 6. And if I could begin drawing members' attention to the top of page 184 as summary report, note there that there were 370 reportable non-reportable incidents through to health and safety. That represents a reduction of 25 incidents when compared to the same period last year. Well, the number of reportable incidents to HSE is also reduced by 1. Just to pick out, and I would imagine that members have seen in the key points in 184 right at the very bottom there, that one of the incidents under the category of slips, trips and falls was reported to HSE as a workplace fatality involving a service user in their own home. As the responsible person for reporting these types of incidents through to HSE, I took the decision based on the circumstances around the incident, Chair. It's fully investigated by my team, reports with colleagues in health and social care, and HSE are currently carrying out their own investigation as the regulator. and we're supporting that investigation and also supporting colleagues in health and social care through that. As I'm in open session, obviously I can't talk about that in much more detail than that, but just to reassure members that we're well aware of this and that we're providing all support necessary. If I could just move on with the report, Chair, the decrease in non-reportable incidents that I've just spoke about there can be seen at the bottom of page 185 is mainly due to a welcome decrease in the number of incidents of violence and aggression in educational establishments, which has gone down with 63 incidents in comparison to the same periods last year. And that's slightly offset by an increase in incidents of violence and aggression in non-educational establishments in periods 5 and 6. Finally, Chair, just in the summary report, in order to ensure safety compliance across all of our higher risk activities, there were 623 unannounced inspections carried out over the reporting period, and we continue to notify EMT each month of the actions taken to correct any deficiencies highlighted as part of those inspections. Happy to take any questions in the report, Chair.
Thank you very much, David. Have any questions on health and safety? Page 183, 184, 185. And in the room, no questions online. You getting a flight there, David? I'll think of something for next time. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is item 8, awarding of contracts period 8th of June to 21st November by David Mitchell, please.
Thanks, Chair. I'll not take members any longer. This is one of the standard reports we bring to Cabinet. To G&S. It operates at kind of 3 levels. One, it's part of our overall commitment to transparency, openness and accountability in the reporting of public spend and public business. Secondly, as I always say, it gives members a helpful reminder as to the width and depth of the absolute scale of the very wide and extensive scale and range of services we provide and all the component parts of all those services that we provide. And I think at a third level, given that all of this is delivered by a procurement section, it's no bigger than a football team with a manager and 11 players in total, including the 2 support analysis. It gives members an insight into the work that's undertaken by that team, supporting and maintaining up to 450 contracts on a 4 and a 5 year, roughly, timescale. So, on that point, I would simply highlight in terms of that width and depth, you have the contract for the New York health provider, you have the providers for employability and skills training and support that agenda. You have our new contract for drainage works, business and domestic removals, the cashless payment system, arrangements, and very important that we manage the asbestos risk, and we always have an external partner to support us with that. You'll recognise their name. We've got the health and safety training refreshed. We've got painting and decorating support there for any surplus. You've got the processing of food waste. You've got the care at home system, and you've got the new contract for the wet floor showers. The big one I would simply quickly point out is the one there at the top of page 219, which is a good example of collaboration. That's the 3 Ayrshires plus West Lothian, and its last iteration it included Falkirk as well. It's headed up the 4G roads framework. What that is and how it operates is that's putting in place contractors to take any surplus to capacity work. Falkirk dropped out because they obviously have sufficient in-house capacity this time round, but it used to be 5 councils across Scotland, now it's 4. The estimated contract value, well, obviously it is an estimate because it depends on how much capacity they have in-house and how much demand they have, but you're looking at nearly 85 million is the estimated value based on the operation of the previous one and taking account for Falkirk stepping out. So that's a big one there, and that gets 30 odd companies, a lot of them local, involved in providing to the Ayrshire councils at least. West Lothian will probably have their own supplier base within that. So that's 4 councils all joining up and doing the same amount of work as they would do individually to produce their own frameworks, and that's what collaboration and sharing is about. And then you've got the supply of the fuel, and we clarified at the pre-agenda that although they are based in Inverness, they do have a local depot, so we're not tankering it down from Inverness. And the last one over the page is the renewal of the bridge inspections, which keeps our roads and bridges and structures safe, etc., etc. So those are the contracts we've let in the last period. If there's any particular questions, we'll try and answer them. Otherwise, it's there for members' information and noting. Cheers.
Thank you, David, for that report. Any questions for David on the awarding of contracts? Nothing online. No questions online. Right, we'll go back to recommendations, and I've missed one. So East Ayrshire Performs recommendations. I forgot page 142. Pardon?
It's just for noting, Chair.
It's just for noting. On page 142, the recommendations are for Cabinet. There's 12 of them. I'm not going to read them out. It's already been through Cabinet. For us, it's page 143. Recommendation to GNS. Note the contents of the report. Happy with that, committee? Thank you very much. And David's last report there, we're at page 213. And again, it's just noting the contents of the report. Everyone happy with that? Awarding of contracts or noting the contents of the report. Thank you very much. And that brings our agenda to an end. Thank you everyone for your attendance. And we can stop recording now, Robert. Thank you.